Assalamu alaikum. My name is Jehangir Khattak and I am the host of today's special episode. We have with us a very distinguished guest, Dr. John Andrew Morrow, who is also known by his Islamic name, Dr. Ilyas Islam. Dr. Morrow is a distinguished Islamic scholar, an academic, a researcher, a preacher, and an accomplished author and a global campaigner for interfaith harmony. He is the director of the Covenants of Prophet Foundation and has written 20 books and more than 100 research articles. He has lectured around the world about Islam. His most critically acclaimed book, The Covenants of Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the World, was published in 2013. Dr. Morrow is also spearheading the Covenants Initiative, which is a global movement for promoting interfaith harmony and understanding. He is educating the Christians about the teachings of Prophet Muhammad regarding the Muslims' relations with the Christians. He is also reminding the Muslims about their obligation of protecting the Christians and other religious minorities in societies where the Muslims are in majority. Dr. Morrow is currently visiting the New York region. He is lecturing in many areas. Yesterday, he was at the Islamic Center of Long Island, where he gave the khutbah of Jummah. And he has given some time to us, and we are very thankful to Dr. Morrow. Dr. Morrow, I welcome you to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with your book, Dr. Morrow, your most critically acclaimed book, The Covenants of Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the World. Tell us about it. What exactly in it that has drawn so much attention?
Well, I bring to light a series of covenants that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, concluded with various Christian communities in the Middle East. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, dictated approximately 300 letters. Now, these letters are found in books of hadith, in books of fiqh or Islamic jurisprudence, and in books of history. And they were all compiled together by a great scholar by the name of Muhammad Hamidullah in a book called Al-Watha'iq, which is unfortunately only available in Arabic. And so if one reads these letters, one really gets an insight into the personality and the political strategy of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Now, among these documents, we find covenants or treaties. For example, the Treaty of Najran, which is well known to many Muslims, a treaty he made with the Christian communities in southern Arabia. We also find, for example, the Treaty of Ayla or the Treaty of Makna, which he made with a Jewish community in northern Arabia, close to the Sinai. Now, many of these covenants were known, but as a result of my research in ancient archives and monasteries, I brought to light 6 covenants that were not, widely known among the Muslim and non-Muslim community. For example, the Ashtiname, the covenant of the Prophet Muhammad with the monks of Mount Sinai. Now, this was well known to certain segments in the Christian community, especially in the Greek Orthodox Church, known to some Muslims as well. The longer version of the covenant of Najran, which was found in a monastery in Turkey. There was also a covenant that he made with the Coptic Christians, the Armenian Christians, the Syriac Orthodox Christians, the Assyrian Christians. So, as I mentioned, some were known, but some were unknown. So in some cases we're dealing with rediscoveries, in other cases we're dealing with actually discoveries of long-lost letters of the prophets that have now come to light. Now, that's an accomplishment in itself, but the most interesting thing, you know, something that's truly a revelation and that has great, you know, consequences in the world today is the content of these covenants. What do they say? Well, they establish that Christian communities, and now some of these covenants were also made with Zoroastrian communities, with Jewish communities, but in general they have the same protections. That Christians, for example, would be free to practice their religion, so they were granted freedom of belief, freedom of religious practice. The prophet protected their monasteries and their churches. He actually encouraged Muslims to help to repair them if you know, they were damaged, to repair them and so on. Why? In order to keep these people as friends and allies of the Muslims. You know, if you oppress people, if you persecute people, if you deprive them of their rights, what are they going to? Well, they're going to hate you and they're going to rebel against you. And so his strategy was to reach out to these Christian, Jewish, and Zoroastrian communities that surrounded Arabia in order to make friends. And so this is very much the same philosophy of the interfaith movement. Get to know your neighbors, build bridges. And of course, this was part, you know, of his strategy, because he was surrounded by hostile forces. You had the Persian Empire. He had offered a covenant to them, which they didn't accept. He had offered peace with the Byzantines, okay, with the Roman Empire of the East, but they rejected it. How different the world would be today had the Europeans accepted peace with the Prophet, and the Persians as well. But the other communities, these Jewish, Christian, and Zoroastrian communities, and even some polytheistic communities, made peace with him. And so he created like this buffer region, this buffer zone all around Arabia between him and his enemies. And so this explains very much why Islam spread so rapidly throughout Arabia and throughout the world, because these people knew the Prophet, they trusted him, and he had guaranteed that he would protect their religion and their freedom and so on. They wouldn't be converted by force. They wouldn't be subject to, you know, oppressive taxation and so on. And so all of when the Muslim armies, when the Sahabas, the companions, and the Prophet started to spread out in these regions, we find that these communities would come forth and they would offer the keys of their cities. The Jews would come and they would welcome the Muslims. And they would tell them, free us from these people who are oppressors, the Byzantines and the Persians and so on. And so this stands in stark contrast to what we see today right, with these people who claim to be Muslims and who claim to be creating an Islamic state.
We will come back to that, Doctor, but I just want to interject one thing, and that is, how many letters and how many covenants did you discover through the course of your research that were not known till now?
Okay, so to put it in context, there are 300 letters of the Prophet that exist in Islamic sources, okay, that are known to scholars.
Okay.
I rediscovered 6 covenants that were not known to you know, Muslim scholars or non-Muslim scholars. That's the subject of the book, 6 Covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the World. And after I published that book, I continued my research and I uncovered even more covenants of the Prophet in other monasteries and so on. That, you know, some of them cherished these documents. They've had them for 1400 years, these letters of protection that they had received from the Prophet. So it was 6 when I published that book, but now it's probably closer to, you know, to 10 or 12.
And your research continues on the subject?
My research continues. The Covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the World was published in 2013.
And how these covenants are authenticated?
Yes. Excellent question. Well, we published 2 books. One is 6 Covenants of the Prophet with the Christians of his time, which just contain these primary sources. And this booklet has been purchased by many mosques and churches. For the purpose of interfaith work. It truly builds bridges. You know, when people attack Islam and they attack the Prophet, you know, sometimes we're not equipped with all of the answers and all the information. But now, you know, if someone accuses the Prophet or Islam or the Quran, or they say Islam is ISIS, ISIS is Islam, we can say, listen, you know, ISIS doesn't speak for Islam. The Prophet speaks for Islam, and this is what he said. So read these covenants, and anything that deviates from this cannot possibly be Islamic.
Right.
So in terms of research, there's another book coming out called Critical Studies on the Covenants of the Prophet. It features a dozen studies by myself and a dozen studies by leading Muslim scholars from around the world. Now, in terms of the issue of authenticity, how, you know, historicity and all those issues. That's what I address in the large book. It's over 450 pages. So I explore issues of authenticity, transmission. I examine these documents based on hadith science, ilm al-rijal, or the study of men. I examine them from a fiqhi point of view, from a linguistic point of view, and I've actually traced every single reference to these documents, because it's not as if they just appeared in a vacuum, they appeared out of nothing. No, there are references to these documents consistently, like for example, the Covenant of the Prophet Muhammad with the monks of Mount Sinai. We have references to this document from the early days of Islam to the present in an unbroken chain. So that one, you know, is from a historical and scholarly and academic point of view, you know, its transmission is very solid. In other cases, we would find in our books that a delegation of Christians came to the Prophet and he gave them a covenant. But they didn't, you know, quote this covenant. They didn't cite it. I mean, you know, he dictated it, they took it, and they left. Well, the thing is, I actually found these documents in those monasteries. So, you know, we're dealing with a different type of evidence here. We're not dealing with like oral transmission. We're dealing with primary
sources and documentary evidence to support all that you have written. Doctor, we will continue our discussion. We will just take a short break. So please stay with us. We'll be back after a short break.